This is going to be a fun little book overview. This is my favorite attribution guide for early date large cents. It's by Robert Powers. You can see my copy is fairly well worn, and this isn't even the one I use most of the time. He's got a smaller version that just covers 1793 to 1795. And I have those stashed all over the place at my office, in my other office, in my car, in my living room. But this is the bigger guide, so let's go through this one. It's going to cover all your early dates. It's going to cover 1793 to 1814, so your wreath and chain cents and liberty caps, and then all the way through to the classic heads. So just going to start flipping through it like we do on these. These maps are so cool. If you've got a die crack, it is, for the most part, it is in this book on the maps. There's a couple of the more rare cracks that you actually won't see on the maps. Sheldon 65 is one that I think of that comes to mind. It's not as uncommon as you'd think. You can identify a Sheldon 65 just by its obverse cracks when the reverse isn't detailed enough to make anything out. But when you get into 1794s, you get a lot more detailed map. There's just so many varieties that have, so many different cracks appear on all those varieties. So you have your common and your rare crack map. So make sure you're checking both. That big Sheldon 68 crack is one that's hard to miss, but only on the rare side. And then the stuff that has red and green is either common or rare, depending on which reverse you have paired with it. For 94s, you've got your little hairstyle chart, which is cool. Here's your reverse, common and rare. And then as we go through the dates, you're going to see maps for all of them, really. 96, 97, 98. These maps are worth the book alone. I mean, truly. If there's a crack, it's here, and it's so quick to find your variety if you've got a crack just by looking in the book. It's also handy for when you're just perusing eBay. I do attribution on virtually every 1794 that crosses eBay, and I do a lot of that just by looking at the cracks in the maps, and then if it's one that doesn't have a crack that I don't recognize, I save it for later and go back through and look at the finer details. But the maps are just too cool. It covers your NCs as well as your collectible varieties. I'll start skipping around in a little bit, but the early date stuff is just so cool. And then you can see your cracks. If they're not visible in the picture, they are, like this one's visible in the picture, but if there was an example, all of these have a cracked obverse because the die cracked during hardening. But if it's one that may or may not have a crack, like here, you're gonna see it drawn in. So we're into the NCs for 94s. Then we've got some discussion on the two edge varieties of 1794, whether the leaf is pointing up or down. And then here's a good example. Like this coin is not cracked, but a crack does appear on Sheldon 24, so they just draw it in. Whereas like this 26 reverse, that crack is just plain as day, so it's not drawn in because you can just see it right there. So great descriptions as well. You could really do your attributions just from here, but I spend so much time with the photos. And then if it's one that doesn't have a real obvious diagnostic, like this does, look at that ribbon tail on this reverse H, you got that long right ribbon tail. But when it's something that's like this Sheldon 28, right? I read the descriptions as well because the photos aren't real. You don't have a real great diagnostic just from looking at the pictures like you do when you see something like that. So for 4 is further than average from the bust. Okay. E in Liberty is high and shifted slightly left. Okay, I see that. So this kind of teaches you what to look for in your reference photo when you go look at the coin when you're comparing them. But I'll jump forward a little bit. I love that 68. This really is one of my favorite varieties. It's just an R5 and hard to get. And mine is pretty ugly, but it's got the fully progressed crack. Jumping forward, there's some drape busts. There's some really cool cuts on drape busts and some cool cracks. So there's some drape busts, and then we'll see some classic heads eventually. The drape bust series is so huge. So huge. And the classic head series is so short. There it is. Now we're into it. A little overdate. Yep. And then 1814's got crosslit for or not. That's one thing that I always remember. Anyway, that is our powers reference book, our attribution guide. Where does he even hide his name at? There it is. 2020 book. They're not cheap, but they're well worth it. If this is the only book I was going to have for attribution, if I could only have one book, this would be the book. So I can't recommend this one highly enough. That's your quick overview. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in and check out my channel. If you're willing to subscribe, I would be much appreciative. I will keep making content, and I will catch you on the next one.